what was World War I called before it went global. When war kicked off in the Balkans, many called it the Third Balkan War, a title that is still used to this day. At first it was about Austria-Hungary versus Serbia, with the chance of Russian help later, a logical follow-on from the Second Balkan War. As more Balkan states got involved, many of us still described it similarly, seeing World War I as two separate wars that just happened to be interconnected. Once Germany felt the need to preemptively strike Russia and France, they called it Weltkrieg, World War. However, this was not at the time a universally accepted term. For Germany though, this title does make sense. They were surrounded by world-dominating empires, feeling the world was stacked against them. This also fits the German idea and philosophy of Weltpolitik, world politics, and their global ambitions. So, maybe they did not mean World War in the sense we know it as, but rather World War as part of world politics. Interestingly, talk of Weltkrieg can be found all the way back in 1905 by the German Navy. France and Britain viewed it differently to Germany. To them it was the Great War, a term we still use. This was used because it appeared like the greatest war in scale yet fought. It also fit the idea of it being a war to end all wars, a great big bang finale. The United States newspapers referred to it as the European War, as they were still practicing isolationism at this point. This is the European War, nothing to do with us, many would argue, but they adapted it to World War once they got involved in 1917. This should give their position in the war more legitimacy. It is easier to convince American soldiers to fight and die for a world war which they have little choice but to partake in, rather than a European war over some weird unknown place called Serbia. Russia was a little more complicated, as usual, having several names. The War, the Great War, the Fatherland War, etc. Even the Second Patriotic War, with the First Patriotic War being Napoleon's invasion of 1812. Not to be confused though with the Great Patriotic War of World War II, of course. After the fall of the Tsar and the rise of the Bolsheviks, it would be referred to as both the Imperialist War and the Tsar's War, as a tool of propaganda against the Tsarist regime, and as a way to further distance themselves from those events. Lastly, Italy also would use terms similar to Western Europe, but they also had the name the Fourth Italian War of Independence, due to their desire to unite all Italian lands under the Kingdom of Italy. It was not until 1939 to 1940 when it started to be universally called the First World War. Interestingly though, some people began referring to it as the First World War even before Hitler invaded Poland, seeing the writing on the wall. Further, Winston Churchill was calling it the World War all the way back in 1927, but remember, he was Chief of the Admiralty during World War I, and so was more global in his thinking than the people on the ground in the trenches would have been. Also, what even is a world war? The 7 Years' War and the Napoleonic Wars were also fought globally, and arguably, if we look at land battles, more globally than World War I. Many historians argue it's not about the battles, but about the nations taking part, making World War I more global. Some argue sea battles should be included, and that is what makes it a world war. And lastly, many historians argue that it was a world war ethnically, due to all colonial soldiers partaking in the conflict. World war in ethnicity, rather than battle fronts. Anyway, hope you enjoyed and learnt something. Comment down below if you want one on World War II, or any other wars for that matter. I find this super interesting. please share this video with anyone you think may be interested. It really helps me out. But for now, this has been the history of diplomacy.